Welcome everyone to the June Solar Festival of the 2025 initiative. My name is Alexander and I welcome you on behalf of the 2025 Coordination Group. Today our guest is Jane P.Johnson, and I invite Wendy Glaubitz-Figueroa, a member of our group, to introduce Jane.
Hello, everyone. It's a great honor for me to introduce Jane P.Johnson. She has been a meditator and student of the wisdom for over 30 years, beginning with the study of psychosynthesis and of the Alice Bailey work. Jane has been using and teaching the methods taught by Lucille Cederkranz in The Nature of the Soul since 1998. Jane is also a part of the Wisdom Link Meditation, a group that has been offering public full moon meditations in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area for many years. And Jane is also a member of Wisdom Impressions Publishers, a group whose purpose is to create the appearance, support the teaching, and facilitate the distribution of the wisdom. In addition, Jane is a registered nurse who has provided direct care in hospitals, clinics, and schools. She's had a varied work life, which has even included substitute teaching in elementary and middle school. So welcome, Jane, to this webinar. And yes, hello.
Thank you. Hello.
And your topic, as Alexander said, is to everything there is a purpose, using meditation to find and unlock that purpose. And wow, that really sounds like a timely topic. And how would you like to begin?
Well, I think I would begin with how timely this is. It's a difficult time for many of us to understand how the events of the world could possibly be related to the divine plan, since things seem so turbulent and so violent, and particularly within the last year or two have we witnessed more than we'd ever thought we would witness of difficulties between humans, among humans, violence of one human against another. So how is it that we can begin to hold fast to our sense of our own positivity as we work on behalf of the divine plan? And I thought it quite lovely that Alexander started today with the mantra of unification, because here we are asked to recall, to remember the love that underlies the happenings of the time. So how does this relate to using meditation to find and unlock purpose? Well, everything that manifests according to law. There can be an appropriation of energy for good or an appropriation of energy for selfish purposes. Nonetheless, however that energy is appropriated, it unfolds according to divine law and order. There are consequences for the use of our energy. When we begin to see the manifestation of many things that we would say are troubling, are negative, it's easy for us to begin, as workers for the light, to begin to question whether we have been effective enough, or whether that day will really come. So in Lucille Cederkranz's book, The Nature of the Soul, she offers very early in the material, in fact, it is in the 4th lesson of that 40-lesson book, She offers a practice which helps us to begin to look into that which manifests around us that has a flavor of being misaligned with the divine plan, or which we might call negative, and see whether we can call forth the divine plan from within any existing condition. So she does this in the context of talking about the three aspects of divinity, and specifically that aspect, the first aspect, purpose, or the purpose, power, and will of God. So in that context, she is telling us to consider that since the divine plan is always endeavoring to manifest, it is our job as students, workers, probationers, whatever we might call ourselves, to begin to endeavor to call it forth. So we're endeavoring to evoke or call forth the divine plan from within a prison of outer manifestation. So I think I'd like to read to you a little bit about what she says here from the Nature of the Soul, Lesson 4. Rather than attempting to stamp out so-called evil via inhibition, the probationer calls forth the divine purpose from within the form in order to manifest the true and the beautiful. So this is somewhat different from saying every cloud has a silver lining, or after some terrible event, I'm sure that was for the best. It's not a sort of a brushing off of the suffering or sorrow created by difficulty in our lives. It is rather saying not so much there is a silver lining, but that there is a spark of the divine that could be awakened here and made to shine forth through the form nature, to bring light, to bring a shift in consciousness, so that the energy that has been misused or may have been misused, we can't always know, may be suffused with the divine purpose behind everything. So that's rather than suppressing evil, rather than stomping out evil, we're endeavoring to look at something we might label as negative, or we might label as evil, and say, where within this form is the spark of the divine that can be lit back on fire, can be evoked, called forth by us, and brought to burn as a fire that lights all of the surrounding form through the consciousness that indwells the form. So I guess that's a long way of saying I think at this time more than ever, it's good for us to share such a technique to strengthen and encourage one another along the way. Further, I would say we're called at this time as the Ray 7 energies moving into manifestation to use our meditation and work and our spiritual alignments directly in service where the rubber meets the road, as we sometimes say here in the U.S., to use it in our everyday life, to bring our meditative alignment, our capacity to hold an alignment into the everyday troubles of our everyday lives. So that means within family relationships, within community relationships, within ourselves and our own particular relationship as the persona and the soul are striving to become appropriately aligned. That quality of Ray 7 is the application of this spiritual understanding in the day-to-day matters of life, and in so doing, we are able to ground the divine plan within the consciousness and body of humanity. So it's a very Ray 7 kind of an idea. Let's ground this divine energy in the everyday. And it's a practical use then of meditation, not to say that we should abandon our more abstract meditations which sustain us and guide us, but that practical application of meditation in daily life is then what grounds what we have brought through in our higher meditations into an activity that can touch all of humanity. So that's where I'm starting from. In the last few weeks, we've had some extremely discouraging, troubling events, including the killings in Orlando, Florida, some things happening elsewhere in the world, the slaying of a member of parliament in England, and any of you in the international network could probably recount to me many more. It is easy for us to lose hope and lose courage. And so one of the first applications I've made of this tool, which is called the adjustment for negativity, was to work on my own reaction to the news when the Orlando nightclub shootings news came in. And I found that my emotional response to that was one of discouragement and even despair. Will this ever stop? So the first place that I found that I could address a difficulty was within my own response mechanism. Does this response mechanism serve the divine plan, the response mechanism of discouragement or despair? No, it takes me out of my alignment, so to speak. So therefore, I initially did an adjustment on that, the discouragement, and that to look at the discouragement and say, what is this pattern or habit or form within my own emotional response mechanism? How can I address a better use of that energy by calling forth the divine intent from within that form? So that's where I started first to use this meditation technique recently, facing a serious sort of a serious impact upon my own emotional equipment from this event that, of course, affected many people in the wider community. But the first place I needed to clean up was myself, and then to move on from there and begin to look at how such work could be used on the larger issues. So now, does that help to get us on our way, Wendy? And is there something I should be mentioning that we've talked about before regarding this that comes to mind for you?
Well, I think it definitely gets us going on our way. Maybe the idea of when you actually did that meditation, was there a realization that came through that you were,
one of the realizations was that despair that I was feeling was not just my own equipment, but that it was a shared despair by the larger body of humanity, and that there was a need to bring light. That's why I was so touched by using the unification mantra to begin today, because again, that touching on we're one humanity, and we need to be able to serve in such a way that we see the love that underlies the happenings of the time. I began to see that one of the next steps is we needed to bring light to one another so that we could continue to serve without discouragement, or not let discouragement weaken our resolve, shall we say, to continue to serve humanity. So that's one thing that came up. The other that came up was that the question of outer appearances. Can we look at the outer appearance and say that we can gauge whether there has been great movement towards the divine or not? Sometimes I think, I'm struggling to say this a bit, but when meditation's been going well in our lives, for many of us, and certainly for me, I think it's easy to say, oh, because of meditation, these things are working better. But what happens when things are not working better? What happens when the world appears more turbulent? So it helps me to look at the form, which is the turbulence in the world, the disruption, the instability, and say, am I gauging the effect of our work as servers and meditators on what's out there in the form world? Because perhaps I'm using the wrong criterion. Perhaps looking at the form as evidence of the success of our work misses the mark. Should I not be looking at the consciousness that indwells these forms? And might I be addressing how to encourage that consciousness? So very interesting. You know, the outer form life looks pretty challenging these days if we talk about world affairs. And yet we know that we've known for a long time that periods of change involve periods of disruption. And in fact, the Gemini seed thought for the persona side or the personality side that comes from the Alice Bailey work, that seed thought is, let instability do its work.
Wow.
And that is it's pretty challenging to accept, because the instability, we see the lives that have been ended, the people whose worlds have been turned upside down, and we say, must we have this instability? And so, again, a meditation technique that addresses that. Here I put that up, the Gemini keynote for the personality or form nature. Let instability do its work. And the keynote for the soul we will be meditating on at the end of this session has to do with the soul recognizing the persona. And as the persona is no longer taking such large control, the soul is allowed to grow and glow. So yes, it's a very interesting thing about that we are letting instability do its work. Yet we're not saying that we want more instability. What we really want is to cultivate the divine spark within any manifesting form and help it to grow and to be brought to light. So that is what one of these tools, this meditation tool I'm talking about today, is called the Adjustment for Negativity, and it helps to address that for us. And also what's helpful about it, I think, the idea of the adjustment for negativity, some might say, well, how do I know what's negative and what's positive and needs adjustment? Well, there's probably nothing, no matter how good, that can't be better aligned with the divine plan. So one is unlikely to do harm by using such a technique to draw out the spark of the divine plan from within the form nature. Even the so-called good can be better aligned with the divine plan. So calling forth its divine purpose from within it, from whichever outer expression in the material and the form world comes to us, calling that out is going to be beneficial. So, hard, yes.
What I also see, because of course you're talking about the disturbing dynamics that are going on the globe, but also within our own lives, the challenges of the personality and the soul. We are also trying to find out when we have conflicts with others as well.
Yes.
We can find out what is the purpose behind
yes.
my present instability with this person, or something like that.
Yes, right. In fact, yes, and I think we already have some language out there that addresses it, but in a way, it's it needs to be taken a little deeper. That some of it will say, well, this difficult person in my life is there to teach me something. And that's a valuable way to look at it. But to take it one step farther and to look at the energy underlying that pattern of relationship, the energy, the divine energy that wants to be born, and help the birth of that divine energy, or help the again, to evoke it into manifestation. So you're not just saying, I have this difficult situation and it's meant to teach me something. That's not a bad thing to say, but we're taking it another level and saying, no, let me look at this difficult pattern, or this difficult pattern within my own responses to people, or within my relationship to someone in my daily life. Let me look at that and say, inside this pattern, inside this form, is the spark of the divine plan. I am going to address myself to that and allow that spark to be brought into a flame, to permeate the whole situation. So I'm doing more than just saying the situation is here to teach me something. I'm there to say, in this pattern, in this situation, there is a divine spark. Let that divine spark of the divine plan be brought into alignment and with the divine plan, and allow it to bloom and grow. And that's how the adjustment takes place. The adjustment takes place because the consciousness has shifted.
Yes, I would like to add that when I have used this technique more in a personal way, I have found that that spark is sometimes a surprise for me. I am not expecting a certain answer. So it's like when ourselves up to the response from the soul, we may be quite surprised.
Yeah. Yes, and sometimes we get a direct sort of an inkling of, oh, well, I hadn't thought of that. Yet on some levels, when we're working on some issues that are probably very difficult issues for us, or these bigger issues, such as the world events the troubling world events, we may not get that aha moment, and yet we can still say, we know the spark is there. I am calling it forth to bloom and flower as truth. So what I mean by this is, you're right. You can get on an individual level sometimes great insights into the divine purpose behind a situation. Or you may not get that insight, and yet you can still invoke that consciousness to grow and be made manifest, because it's an interesting thing. Sometimes you can get great feedback, and other times maybe not so much. So, mindful of that, I wonder if I should move on and talk a little bit about just how this particular exercise works.
Yes.
Specifically. So it is called the adjustment for negativity. It appears in the Lucille Cederkrantz book, The Nature of the Soul. And it's in lesson 4, which is one of the lessons on the first ray, or the ray of will and power. And what she suggests we do, and I will kind of describe this a little bit, and then I'd like us to do it together. She suggests that when we do find a condition of negativity in our own lives or in our larger sphere of contact, we can carry out this simple meditation technique. It's an applied use of meditation. We make the alignment. Of course, we calm the lower vehicles, we relax the body, and calm the emotions, and bring ourselves to a point of focus, making contact with the soul. And then we endeavor to make contact. We just align with, we don't have to be making contact with, but align with the Christ. And then align with divine purpose. What she calls it in her work is, she calls it aligning with the Father, because in the time that Lucille taught, A lot of her people use that terminology to understand the will and purpose aspect of God. But we'll call it, we're going to align with divine will and purpose. And then we look at, with that alignment in place, so we are now in our meditation, we look at that condition that's out there, that's manifesting, something that's appearing in our lives. And we recognize that it has come into place because divine law and order, perhaps there's been a misappropriation of energies that's allowed it to come into place in a negative way, but nonetheless, it's worked out according to the law. Because the law holds, even if people, or if the energy used in the situation or created the difficulty was misused. So we say, first we recognize that that condition is the result of working out of divine law and order. And then we become receptive to that inherent, that innate divine purpose that's inside, the spark of the divine within the situation. It's when you and I were talking earlier, Wendy, we talked about the namaste. It's the namaste that we say to one another. It's like saying namaste to the situation. I recognize the innate divinity within you, even if it's a circumstance, that spark of the divine. Once we've recognized that there is a purpose, and we may recognize what that purpose is, or we may just simply recognize that there is a purpose, then call it forth, evoke it. Call it forth from within, whatever it's been imprisoned within, whatever form imprisons it, and allow it to bloom and take root within the consciousness activity aspect. So there's a consciousness within there that needs to be lit with divine purpose. Allow that to happen. Allow that to spread through the consciousness and grow and bloom as truth. So now, instead of endeavoring to suppress something within ourselves or within the world that we don't like, we're endeavoring to suffuse it with the divinity that lies latent within it. Only after we've been able to do that, to see the innate divinity and allow it to take root, bloom through the consciousness, we're evoking it to bloom out, then see the radiance of that truth, dispelling the darkness cast by the shadow of ignorance. See that radiant light emerge from the consciousness and shine through the form nature. And as it does, it'll transmute the outer form into a truer reflection of its inner reality. And at the end, then we just say, may the divine plan manifest divine adjustment in divine law and order. That is called the adjustment for negativity. And I have it as a handout that, or an attachment that you can download from this. But I would prefer, I've taken it right from The Nature of the Soul with an adaptation by permission. However, when I lead it today, I'm going to not lead it word for word as it's printed, but rather walk us through doing this together. And I suggest that in a practice like this, one always begin with things closer to yourself, something that you can develop an understanding about. It's a meditation tool, and when you first use it, you want to use it on smaller things so that you develop your sense of how it works. And of course, we can go on to use it on larger issues. Surprisingly, I found on addressing the issue about the shootings in Orlando, Florida, I thought that I would be focused on gun control, and I was not. I was actually led to look at some of the feeling states that were underlying the condition, and to work with that instead of what I thought I might be working with when I started my meditation. But I have been working with this adjustment for a number of years. I think it's good to to start, as we've talked about, with issues within one's own immediate life and affairs, because they give one an understanding of how it works, and all of this helps to ground the divine plan within humanity. Anything we set to rights in our environment, anything that be better aligned with divinity, helps to ground the divine plan in humanity. So it's lest one should think it's selfish to work on one's own issues. It's all part of helping bring this better alignment within humanity. So, shall we do the exercise? Shall we do it together as a meditation? Do we feel we're ready for that? Okay, I'm going to just go ahead. So, prepare yourself for meditation as you would normally, relaxing the physical instrument, calming the emotional vehicle, and allowing the mental to become poised, alert, and receptive. And integrate those three bodies, physical, emotional, and mental. And make contact with the soul. And aligned with the soul, make a further alignment to the Christ, the heart of love. And through that heart of love, reaching to connect with the will of God. That aspect of the divine plan that has purpose. Now, take a condition within your life and affairs that you might identify as a negative pattern. It might be within your own psychological or persona makeup, or it might be a difficulty which you are experiencing in your activities of daily life, in relationship to others in your field of contact or to your place of work, any daily activity that you identify as carrying a sort of a negative outer condition. Recognize that that manifesting condition is the working out of divine law and order, even if that working out is the result of a misunderstanding or misappropriation of energy. And now become receptive to the divine purpose which lies within the consciousness of this particular situation. That divine purpose which lies hidden within. And imagine it as a small flame or spark. Once you have recognized that purpose, you need not be able to describe the purpose in detail. Great if you can, not necessary. Call the purpose forth, evoke it from within the limitations that have imprisoned it. Call it forth as a manifesting reality. See this take root within the consciousness aspect of the situation or condition. And see that purpose bloom and grow as truth. Take time to watch that purpose develop and grow. And now, see the radiance of truth, the light of truth dispelling the darkness. It is casting off the darkness that came in as a result of the shadow of ignorance. So now the light is growing and pushing back the darkness that was caused by the shadow of ignorance. And see that radiant light emerge from the consciousness and shine forth through the form nature. See it transmute the form nature as it does this, changing the outer form into a true reflection of its inner reality. And then we say the words, may the divine plan manifest divine adjustment within this condition in divine law and order. And then we sound the Om. And then we turn our attention elsewhere. We allow ourselves to release that. We're done with the exercise. We don't hang on to the problem for now. If we're going to come back and work on a problem repeatedly because it's a difficult problem, each time we have to let it go when we're done with meditation and turn our attention to our daily life and affairs. So I think I would be interested in questions or comments at this time, if it's the right time for that.
I think it is.
Thank you very much, Jane. And yes, we invite now all the webinar participants to share your impressions or comments or maybe questions. And in order to do that, please use the function raise your hand on your control panel. As you've noticed, you are muted as everyone else among the attendees of the webinar. We do that for technical reasons to avoid audio reverberations. But please raise your hand and we will unmute you and you will be able to speak. Also, you can write your comments in the question section of the control panel. And usually it takes a couple minutes for people to formulate their questions or thoughts. So I can ask the question that came to me as I was listening about this technique. It reminds me in a way work with the glamour, because in a way negativity could be seen as a glamour, and in order to see the true reality behind the cloud of glamour, we have to penetrate and connect with a purpose. But it's a different aspect of the work of the glamour, I would say. It's different from the technique of working with the glamour given in the books of Alice Bailey. Have you thought
Ye-
about that parallel?
Yes, I have. There are a lot of ways in which uh, these techniques that come like this one can be related to the Bailey work. I think that specifically in Glamour, DK gave a tool for people to use to work on glamour. Often in the books, he says, ponder on this, and allows a person to find their own tool. But yes, this is very similar, that finding the purpose within the area. And this is more, it's a almost more concrete than that work, but it is a parallel type of work. It's more, it has a little more, this one has got such an application to everyday situations, and the glamour has more of a second ray flavor, but it's definitely, they're related work.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that answered your question, but yes, I have seen the relationship between the two. I feel the frequency difference is maybe in what, when one is working with glamour, one is often working with the larger, more abstract issues, and this one also can work with the day-to-day smaller. That's been my application of it, but you may have more experience with using the glamour work on an individual level as well.
Yeah, I agree that this, I never done this technique before, but I definitely can see that this technique can allow us to work with the individual glamours penetrating behind this cloud of negativity and see what is the reason behind. Yes, and
Yeah.
dissociate from this glamour cover.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. There are a few comments coming in the question section to us, and so I will just read. There's a comment from Risa. I can see applications for this when one is working in therapy with clients. It turns everything we have been taught as therapists and therapeutic technique and interpretation inside out and upside down. This technique seems to be the missing piece to therapeutic healing.
Well, there's a whole section of Lucille Cederkran's work called soul therapy. Now, this is not an area I have worked with extensively, but it relies upon tools like this and another tool called the transmutation exercise to help to get at a certain level of person's functioning. Of course, these tools are only usable if the person is healthy enough to be able to meditate. And in mental health and psychological work, the one is not able to, the client may not be able to meditate at the time. However, of course, the therapist can meditate on behalf of the difficulty. But yes, it does change one's view of ways to approach psychological difficulties. I don't think it replaces psychology. I think it just gives one another perspective for working with it.
Regina asks, first of all, says that great meditation and would very much like a transcript of this technique.
and that's one of the that is the handout that is that you already have in the if you look at, I think it's in your control panel.
Yes. Yes, so you
Yeah.
can check on your control panel, there is a section called handouts. So if you will click on that part of the section, you will see that there is a PDF document that you can download. And for those who listens this webinar in the recording, there is a link on the archived page of this webinar, the link to the same document, so you will be able to download this technique as well. There is a comment from Christine. In the use of the violet flame, we can evoke the cleansing spark in relation to the seventh ray.
Yes. Yes, that is yet another seventh ray technique. And I think we need to say that there are many approaches to the work of this seventh ray era of application of our spiritual knowledge in everyday life. That is a tool I'm familiar with. And to me, the more means I have of addressing day-to-day difficulties, the more approaches, the greater the chance I will do something on the consciousness level about the difficulty rather than fall back in my old personality program patterns and say, oh, I feel helpless, there's nothing I can do. But I am familiar with that violet flame technique, and I think it's lovely.
There is a question from Frida. I think this is a very useful and important technique. Can you give us an example of using this successfully for world or local issues or problems?
Yes, I think I can. The thing is, success is a slippery term because sometimes the outer picture doesn't look good right away. That is to say, it isn't like a magical shifting of something from bad to better. But I have done some work in the community I live in around decisions made about our city council at one time was considering taking a portion of land, and it was open land, and the choice was, would they sell it to build more housing, or would they put in a park, and if so, how could they possibly afford it? And I did some of this work over that just to work on the forms that I saw had to do with had to do with monetary money. If we make a park, then we don't get taxes. If we build houses here, property taxes we can collect. And in the end, the decision did go for the park, and it's a wonderful park. But I cannot say it was my work alone that did that. I just know I worked on it. I don't want to take credit for, but I do believe you can, you see the dilemma, you see the struggle, and the community was struggling about the need for more tax people on the tax rolls, so that property could have gone to houses, but instead it did go to a park, and it's a beautiful park. But can I take credit? I don't know. So we don't know about outcomes. We really don't. And that's the difficult thing with meditation, is that the long view is much longer than our lifetimes. And we forget that the little bumps in the road, the little difficulties that are big difficulties to us, will not be remembered in 5,000 years. But we have difficulty looking at a span that great in the development, the spiritual development of this planet, and the spiritual development of our own planetary logos. That's a big cycle. And we forget sometimes that the small things that are big to us, maybe they look bad to us, but over the time. Does that make sense? So some of it is saying, yes, I've seen positive outcomes. On the other hand, when I fail to see positive outcomes, it does not mean I have failed in my work. And I think for all of us, to encourage us to remember that the outer appearance does not tell the whole story. There are things going on and moving within the consciousness, and that's what's important.
Thank you. I again encourage our webinar participants to raise your hands that we could unmute you and we could hear your live comments and questions. It's always good to hear other voices. And there is another question. It's from Diana. Do you see this adjustment for negativity meditation as a way to bring the energy polarities of human experiences into balance? Would you say this is a middle ground we are looking for, rather than a shift all the way to opposite pole of positive from the originating negative focus? I will post this question that everyone could read it because it's a rather long question, so it's okay.
Yes, and it's complicated.
Yeah, so
yes.
You can see it in the chat.
All right, I need to look at that. I am not seeing it because, oh, here. Okay, now I see it. As a way to bring the energy polarities into balance. That's a very interesting idea, and I'm not sure that I've ever looked at this exercise in this way, but working with the pairs of opposites, I think that this could help us, yes, in the process of synthesizing and the balance and synthesizing of the pairs of opposites. But I have to confess, I've never given it thought in this way. Very interesting comment. Thank you so much for that, because I'll give it due consideration in time, too. I'll be meditating on this one. Thank you.
But how do you see that there's certain things that we as disciples still have to face as they are, as a negative influence that we have to stand against? And I see the value of adjustment of our attitude, which allows us to move forward and to be more active. But at the same time, where is that balance? As Diana puts this, is this a method of bringing the balance? How we can distinguish, how we discriminate, whereas the things that we just adjust or the things that we actively stand against and see them as they are.
Are you talking about things that seem to come from evil?
Yes. Yes.
That there, because one, I think, can take a stand against that which is evil, while at the same time, if I would not do this alone but in a group formation, one can take a look at what is the consciousness that is behind this particular negative manifestation. Now, that's a dangerous thing to do alone, but it is not that one is endeavoring, it's you're not endeavoring to join the evil thing or to say it's all fine because I'm invoking the good, but it is rather saying, may the divine, it's sort of like saying, may we close the door where evil dwells, may the divine plan manifest divine adjustment in this, is a way of saying, even this, can we begin to invoke this spark so that it can change from within. But but we have to, yes, we have to take our stand in the outer world. But an example again with the gun violence, which is so troubling to so many of us, is that uh, uh, one might look at that. Now, that is not as evil as some of the evil gets, but as an example of a pretty terrible thing, and say, what is the consciousness that drives this? What drives this on the consciousness level? Not on the political level. We might still be out there campaigning politically for changes. It might not on the physical level. We might still be out there campaigning for changes in the physical level. But what is the consciousness that drives us? And is there a way that that consciousness can be brought to begin to have its alignment with the divine plan? And we would still stand up against the outer manifestation to protect others as need be. But how is that? How is humanity? How is that line from DK, I always forget my sources on this. I believe that the heart of humanity is sound.
Yes, that's the quote.
So, and I don't know where it comes from I can't tell you which book, but saying I believe that the heart of humanity is sound is a way of saying even those that are perpetrators of evil deeds, they are a part of the one humanity. How do we move the consciousness out into those areas where evil is being done in such a way that it's better aligned with the divine plan, while at the same time opposing that evil on our outer activity? That's kind of what I'm thinking, and I'm thinking this through as I speak to you. So I feel like I'm going to, after this webinar, I'm going to be thinking about what you said for days about that very question. You've given me good food for thought, but right off the top of my head, that is what I think about that. That we can oppose that outer form. I still vote. But on the consciousness level, I'm working with all people of all different political persuasions. I still, have an opinion. I may take a stand in my community for what I believe is right, but at the same time, I'm going to work on the consciousness from all aspects of this.
Yeah, I agree with you that it's very complex dilemma for all of us who use occult meditation. And we, on one hand, should be very careful not to overstep the boundary of intrusion into the outer events with the power of thought, to maintain this balance. And on the other hand, we are called for action. And
yes, we are.
Have to take an active stand. And so it's every time it's a question for us how we discriminate. And
yes, and how we keep our own personal agenda out of the picture. Is this, what am I aligned with here? Am I responding or reacting from the persona vehicle, or am I aligned through the soul to my best understanding of the divine plan when I take action?
Yeah, because often we're limited in our consciousness of seeing the entire picture. What is actually the purpose? Yes.
Yeah, and I think there's a humility, and not a humility that says I am nothing, not the icky humility, but there is a humility in knowing that we do not understand the whole picture, but by the best we can do within our alignment and invoking that alignment with the divine Christ and the divine plan to move forward, and saying I am endeavoring to stay in alignment on this and still act. And I've been thinking this, and still know that we're going to make mistakes, but better that we should step forward and do something than be passive. So the mistakes then are likely to be made, but we have to do the best we can with our alignment. And I call that a type of humility that says, I know that I do not know the whole picture here, and I'm still going to act endeavoring to stay in alignment. Yeah, very interesting stuff.
And there is a comment from
Yes.
Celeste, who says that, and never my will, but divine will, however that
Yes.
works out in form,
Yes,
harmlessness and
correct.
detachment.
Yes, that's it. May the divine plan manifest divine adjustment within divine law and order. All of this is saying, if I have a personal, if I'm doing subjective work of any kind, if I am doing meditation work of any kind, and I have a personal preference or agenda, then I have to just say, I recognize I have my failings. May this work out according to divine will. Recognizing that my selfish biases might enter in, but say, may this be, if it is in your divine will, is a way to release that and to recognize that we have that shortcoming. We can't always see. In Lucille Cedar-Kranz's book, The Nature of the Soul, she gives, in the lessons on Ray 7, she gives a series of kind of cautions about making sure one is doing work, and then recognize doing the cleanest work and not tainting it with our motives, our personal motives. But what is very interesting about it is that she says, really, you have to recognize none of us have pure motives, so you always condition anything you send out by saying, may this be, if it is in divine law and order, or if it is in your divine will. So it is a way to protect ourselves from ourselves, so to speak, from our own misunderstandings or weaknesses. If this be in your divine will, so let it be in divine law and order. And that's, it's nice to know that there is something we can say that will help cleanse our intent as it goes out. So I think that's a valid point. If this be in your divine will. Well, how are we doing here?
So I think now we are getting close to time for meditation. And even
Yes.
though there are more comments, I think we should move into meditation now. And just want to bring to before to our collective focus that there is, in parallel with our webinar, there is another webinar organized by Lucy's Trust, who is Triangles webinar that's happening every Monday. So as we go into meditation, we can connect with those people who meditated on that webinar, and some of people who were in our webinar in a true spirit of masonry, they attended our webinar and joined that webinar. So we lost some participants, but that way they connected us with that pool of meditators. So
That's good. And I think that I will lead an adaptation of the full moon meditation used by the Arcane School people, a somewhat simplified version of that, so that we'll also be connecting with them in spirit, because the form of the meditation will be very similar. And we will use the Gemini keynote for the soul. I recognize my other self, and in the waning of that self, I grow and glow. And of course, that refers to recognition of the persona as the other self, and the I is the consciousness, the higher consciousness soul. And I recognize my other self, and in the waning of that self, I grow and glow will be our seed thoughts. So thank you for mentioning that, and let us go ahead and begin to meditate then, if everybody would prepare for meditation. Again, we'll bring ourselves back to the relaxation of the physical body. Taking a few deep breaths. And then calming the emotional. Again, using the breath to release any turbulence. And turning the attention to the mind nature, asking it to be poised, alert, and receptive as we integrate the threefold personality vehicle, an aspiration to the soul. And as we make our identification as soul, we become aware of all the meditators in this group with whom we are linked in meditation at this time, consciously forming that linkage and then stretching out to include the meditators through the Lucius Trust Group, and then widening our field of contact to include those who meditate at this time of the second Gemini full moon. We recognize our oneness with our fellow servers, our connectedness across the planet, so that we have made a lighted web of meditating servers across planet Earth. And now we reach upwards in our alignment. Remaining connected with the group, we now direct the attention upward to contemplate the spiritual life of our planet, beginning with the hierarchy, the planetary heart center, the great ashrams, and aligning with the Christ at the heart of the hierarchy. And we extend this alignment, this line of light that comes from ourselves working as meditators upwards to Shambhala, the center where the will of God is known. We now hold the contemplative mind open to the energies streaming in from beyond our planet. And pouring through Shambhala and radiated through hierarchy. We visualize the three great planetary centers, Shambhala, where the will of God is known, hierarchy, and humanity, all becoming connected and interacting. And we meditate upon the seed thought for the Gemini cycle. I recognize my other self, and in the waning of that self, I grow and glow. Using the creative imagination, visualize the energies of light, love, and the will to good pouring throughout the planet and becoming anchored on Earth. We see this energy pouring through Shambhala and the hierarchy, through the Christ to the new group of world servers, to persons of goodwill everywhere in the world, to the places of distribution on the planet itself. From this center of consciousness, we realize that we are part of the one planetary soul and sound the affirmation of the soul. In the center of all love, I stand. From that center, I, the soul, will outward move. From that center, I, the one who serves, will work. May the love of the divine self be shed abroad in my heart, through my group, and throughout the world. Visualize the downpouring spiritual inflow released from Shambhala, where the will of God is known, through the hierarchy and streaming into humanity through the channel we have prepared. Consider how these inpouring energies are establishing the pathway of light for the coming world teacher, the Christ. We'll now sound the great invocation. I'll be using the version that was originally published by Alice Bailey. And as we do so, we have a version that we can all share. Thank you. We will do the version on your screen. And as we do so, visualize the outpouring of light and love and power through the spiritual hierarchy, irradiating the consciousness of the whole human race. Let us pause between stanzas. From the point of light within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the human minds. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the human hearts. May the coming one return to earth. From the center, where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little human wills, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center, which we call the human race, let the plan of love and light work out, and where evil dwells, let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. Om. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Jane, so much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. And as the full moon continues, we keep our group alignment and hierarchical alignment, working with the energy of Gemini full moon. And also today, in a couple hours, we enter into the astronomical point of solstice. Summer in northern hemisphere, winter in southern hemisphere. And traditionally, the 2025 initiative brings the focus during the solstice time into the planetary cycles. And we usually invite an astrologer to share own thoughts on such event, planetary event. And so tomorrow we're going to have solstice festival webinar, still working with the energies of the Gemini full moon, even the sun moves to Cancer. And that's going to be the topic of this webinar is going to be the signs of the heavens towards 2025 with Antonella Nobilio from Italy. And I invite you all to join this webinar tomorrow at the same time as today. And we will continue working with these energies of this full moon. And also, I want to invite you to join our next new moon webinar on July 5th. It's going to be Cancer new moon. And starting from the last new moon webinar in Gemini, we start a new project when, besides meditation on the zodiacal qualities of any particular month, we will bring our collective focus into the UN Sustainable Development Goals, going each goal a month for 17 months. And this coming month cycle, Cancer cycle, we will work with the goal number 1, no poverty. And I reminded that this month in Gemini, with Gemini energies, we work with the goal quality education for all. So please join us into that project as well. And thank you again, everyone, and thank you, Jane.
Thank you.
And let's, to end our work today, sound together the Gayatri.
Ah, wonderful. O
Thou
thou who
who
givest
gives the
sustenance
sustenance to the universe,
to the universe,
from
from
whom
whom
things
all things,
proceed, to whom all things
all
return.
things,
Unveil to us the face of the true spiritual sun, hidden by a disk of golden light, that we may know the truth and do our whole duty as we journey to thy sacred feet.